So good morning, I'm Mark Wood, and I work in the LCMS Office of National Mission in St. Louis, but I'm fortunate enough to be a deployed worker. So even after spending 5 years in St. Louis, we escaped, and we now live here in the East Valley in a community called Gold Canyon, out in the desert, and we love it. It's great to be back in Arizona. It took us 30 years to get back. So this is my wife, Mary Ellen, also known as Free Labor. And she's been...
I just want to say I'm glad you got out of Gold Canyon with the Ren Fair out there this
Oh my gosh. It's only on the weekends, so it's not too bad. There's a thing called the Renaissance Fair, and it's a permanent location, 50 acres. And it's only 8 weekends a year. But the traffic is insane, just absolutely insane. And we went last year because we're like, oh, what is this Ren Fair thing all about? It's basically about exposing your body in public with some trappings of... That's where you guys are going? Yeah, right, yeah.
I don't know yet. Traffic is only bad one way.
Yeah, you have to just know what times of the day to go which direction. So.
People times is just a far better experience. Do that instead. The dinner theater in Scottsdale.
Oh, yeah. So my role these days, I have all sorts of titles. Managing Director of Church Planting, Renewal, and Support. And my area that I've been with National Mission now for almost 9 years, my area of particular focus is witness and outreach. And so if you've done Everyone is Witness, the evangelism program, who's done that? Anybody? A few people? Okay. You might recognize me from the videos, which have made me Lutheran famous.
He wasn't as gray.
Yeah, this is just, I added this because as authenticity or something. Yeah, that was 5 years ago, that we released that. And then Revitality, which are the revitalization resources that we'll talk about. And now with the added, responsibilities for church planting, which is great because when I was called to National Mission, I was a church planter in Florida. And we enjoyed that, even though we said we'd never do it again. So what did we do after moving to Gold Canyon and looking around and saying, hey, there's no LCMS congregation in Gold Canyon? Let's start one, because we're crazy people. And we found Ed last year at the Best Practices, and he lives in Gold Canyon. So it's like, hey, you want to start a new church with us? And Ed's like, well, why not? I'm a maniac too. So we started Shepherd of the Canyon Lutheran Church about 6 months ago. So, and we're just kind of doing what church planting does, right? Just kind of making our way. So.
Then the invitation, you're all welcome.
You're all welcome. You're all welcome to come. Just look for us at the Best Western Inn and Suites in Gold Canyon. So, hopefully in a new location soon. So, working on it. So that's a little bit about us. We're people say, where are you from? I said, pick a spot. Mary Ellen grew up in Southern California. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs. I was stationed at Williams Air Force Base when it was an Air Force base back in the 70s and 80s, and never moved back to Chicago. So I am a fairly smart person, see? There's some evidence of it. So. All right. And when I talk about revitalization, lately I've been talking about it in a little bit different terms. Because most of the time when we talk about revitalization, we're talking about it from our concern. How do we keep our church going? How do we keep the doors open? How do we do this for us? What I'd like to talk about today is looking at revitalization a little differently. Looking at it from the aspect of loving our neighbors. That revitalization is something we want to do, and we want to do well, because it enables us to share the love of Christ in our community. If we have to close our church, who's going to be there to share the love of Christ? So keeping it going for the sake of our neighbor. That's the general theme here. Tiny URL at the bottom. This has all the slides in it. It's a PDF file. So if you're one of those people who like to have the slides, just download them by using this URL, which is tinyurl.com/BPM2023-love. So there you go. Or you can just take pictures of the screen as we go along, which some people like to do that too. Okay, here's the thing. This is what things are starting to look like according to Pew Research. I know you can't see all the detail here, but here's the bottom line. By the year 2070, Christianity will be a minority religion in America. That's what they predict. Current trends continue. The number of people who identify as Christians will continue to decrease, and we'll see about somewhere between 35 and 46% of Christians will identify as Americans in 2070. What do you think the fastest growing group of religious affiliation is in America right now? None, yeah. Some of the nuns are called duns. They're people who've kind of burned out on the church and have left it. I think Pew Research is wrong. I think we're already a minority religion in America because they count people like Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, and they count them as Christians statistically, and we know they're not. So when you start taking out things, you find that we really are already a minority. There was a recent study done by a guy named Lyman Stone. I don't know if anybody listens to Issues, etc., but he had a couple of interviews back in October where he said, he referred to this report from Pew. He said based on his research, the impact in the Missouri Synod is probably 3 times as great as it is at the church at large. Because one of the factors of our church is we're an older church body. We're aging out. Yeah.
Oldest.
We're the oldest?
Oldest.
Maybe the ELCA is older than us. No, man.
Not anymore.
No, not anymore. So we're predominantly Anglo. We're predominantly older. Our reproduction rate is low.
Gotta fix that.
What's that?
Gotta fix it.
Gotta fix it.
Have more babies.
Have more babies. Lyman Stone said
Not all of
by
them.
2070, the population of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, the membership will be 400,000. Said if we double our fertility rate, it'll be about 700,000. Said if fertility rate stays the same and we double our evangelistic results, it'll be about 700,000. Right now we're about 1.6, 1.8 million members. Those are catastrophic losses. And it raises the question, how's this going to affect our ability to care for the people who are already in the church? And how will it affect our ability to share the love of Christ with people who are not in the church? And the majority of people in our culture. So these are real challenges that we have to look at. And here's the picture of decline in the LCMS. About 80% of our congregations have plateaued, they've flattened out, or they're declining. We're losing members. And the losses are through, attrition, normal attrition, like people who have left the church militant and joined the church triumphant. So one of the things we've got to keep in mind always is the church is not in decline. The church is always growing. Just some of our members are in heaven that used to be on earth. But congregations do decline, and 80% of our congregations are declining. And I wondered, this is statistics I've been sharing for almost 8 years now, and I recently asked the Rosters and Statistics guru, is this still a good number? I don't want to tell people a bad number, is this still good? Because, we actually haven't looked at it from that way recently, but we just completed a study for the Council of Presidents where they asked the question, how many of our congregations have had an increase in the last, 5 years, I guess it was. And here's the standard they were using. An increase of 1 or more baptized members. A net increase of 1 or more. And slightly under 20%. So that's right in line with the statistic. And that's 1 or more. That's a pretty low threshold. So this is kind of a depressing number, but this is not the number to focus on. This is the number to focus on here. approximately 100%. I say that tongue in cheek. It's 100%, but or should be. But approximately 100% of our LCMS congregations are part of God's mission. That's why we're here. This is what we're all about, to carry out the mission that Christ has given us to do. And what is Christ's mission? Well, Luke 19:10, right? The Son of Man came to seek and save that which is lost. Is Christ's mission complete? No. Are there any lost people left in the world?
Lots.
Yeah. Any lost people in America?
Lots.
Any lost people in Arizona? How about in Phoenix Metro? How about in...
Driving the wrong way.
Yeah. How about any lost people in your circle of friends? In your family? Yeah. See, we don't have to go far at all, do we? To see we're part of God's mission. Does that mean Jesus failed in his mission? No, that was a quick no, thank you. No, he accomplished his part of the mission, right? He died on the cross, paid for the sins of the world. What part of the mission is left? Take that out into the world, tell people about it. That's our part of the mission, right? That's our part. So that's where we're at. That's the thing to stay focused on. Now there's two ways to address decline, practically speaking. One is let's plant some new churches. The other is let's revitalize churches. Now when I was trained as a church planter back in the, I hate to say, these dates are getting further and further back there, Back in the 2000s, I went to the Center for U.S. Mission, and was certified as a trade. See, I told you I was certifiable. I was certified as a church planter. And the adage at the time was, we should plant churches because it's easier to give birth than to raise the dead.
But
However, basically in the church planting world, revitalization is like, why bother? So when I was called to National Mission, I thought I was going to be doing church planting. Instead, Bart Day, anybody know Bart Day? Yeah, a pox on Bart Day. He says, Woody, come to my office. Oh, great. He goes, I want you to do the revitalization initiative. I said, I'm a church planter. You want me to do revitalization? This is nuts. I said, it's like waking up in the morning next to Leah instead of Rachel. It was like, but it's like, this is what the church needs me to do. This is what I'll do. What I discovered is, first of all, the God who gives birth, who's the author of life, is also the God who raises the dead. Okay, so it's easier to give birth than raise the dead? No. Neither one of those better be a human endeavor, or we're going about it all wrong. Right? It may be more exciting to take care of a new baby than great grandma, but both are acts of love and service. And so it's not an either or, is the bottom line. We need to plant new churches and we need to revitalize existing churches. In fact, the best way to plant new churches is revitalize existing churches. So, Tim, you going to say something?
Yeah, I always think of it this way. Christmas and Easter are vital to the gospel story.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Jesus has to be born, but he also has to rise from the dead.
Yeah.
So you need both new
Need both.
and resurrection.
Right. So we know from study that the most successful church planting method is that daughtering new congregations. So an existing congregation is healthy enough to reproduce, and it reproduces. It creates a new church. That's the healthiest way and, quote, most successful way to plant new churches. So, but both of these, revitalization and church planting, depend on effective witness and outreach. And here's the problem we have as the Missouri Synod. We don't do this. We're curved in on ourselves, and we keep the gospel to ourselves. Now, not entirely, because where is the center of Lutheranism today?
Missouri.
In
St. Paul, Minnesota.
St. Paul, Minnesota?
In Jerusalem.
There's arguments about whether, St. Louis or Fort Wayne is a true Mecca. But the actual center of global Lutheranism today is Africa. Why is Lutheranism so vibrant in Africa? Missionaries. What have we been doing for the last 100 years?
Going over there.
Just going over there and telling them the gospel. So now we're seeing the fruit. Yeah, they're sending people here. Huh? But what have we been doing for the last 3 generations in America?
Not much.
Nothing.
No, we haven't been out there. And I was talking about this the other day about this is at the Board for National Mission meeting. But, I said, our first love as the Missouri Synod was to take the gospel out into our world. So when you see the history of the Missouri Synod, we were a church all about sharing the gospel. Lutheran Hour Ministries were started in the 30s, right? That whole thing, up till then even, everything was about taking the gospel to people who were lost. And we're like the church of Ephesus in Revelation. We've lost our first love. And it's time to get back to our first love, and that is to taking the gospel to those who are perishing. And whether we're going to do new churches or revitalize existing churches, it boils down to that, returning to our first love. So why revitalize? That's the question that was asked a lot. Why should we even bother? I mean, let's face it, this is a very challenging thing to do. There's nothing easy or fast about it. There's several practical reasons, though. One is the church already has a place in the community. I mean, you've been there. Now, you may not have been doing much, but when you start doing things again, people will say, "Oh yeah, St. John, that's been here forever." I didn't know they were still open, but yeah, and that's great. I pass by their church building all the time. So having an established place in the community is really great. I mean, when you're a new church start, everybody's looking at you like, yeah, who are they? What are they? They're not going to make it. In Florida, we had a YMCA near us, and they rented out their facilities to new church starts. And they always had a banner up front. I called it the church du jour. 1 week it was, The Rock. We're the new way of being church. Come join us. And then, a couple weeks later, the banner was Journey Church, a new way of being church. Come join us. And it was just like this rotation of new church starts because they didn't have a place in the community, and people just sort of ignored them. So when we started what became Lamb of God, we started in a community center. Nobody paid any attention to us at all. We couldn't make any inroads in the community. When we bought a property, people started, oh, that's legit. I'm going to check that out. So having a place in community, big advantage. Having facilities. I mean, you may not love your facilities, but you got facilities. That's great. We're meeting in a hotel conference room right now. We've already had people leave saying, well, I don't want to worship in a hotel. Plus there was the problem with my grandson bringing his girlfriend to church, and Mom was tracking her phone. What are you doing at a hotel with a boy? I was like, I'm in church, Mom. No, you're not. What did you have to do?
Yeah, I had to take a picture of them. Send it to her mom because she was.
See, we're really at church. There's the pastor. So, yeah.
Anyway.
But we can't. Right now, we can't do anything during the week. We only have 4 hours on Sunday morning that we rent the place, and we have no facility. And how are we going to do outreach? And how are we going to have activities? So existing facilities, big plus. And some of our facilities are just fantastic. As we travel around the Missouri Synod, we see churches that are just like, I wish I could pick this up and move it to Arizona. Yes, you can say.
I have a question.
Okay.
Why did you say you cannot do anything in the community during the week?
What I'm saying is we can't have activities that we can host because we don't have a place. So we could do some limited things, but if we wanted to do an event or an activity, we don't have a place to do it. If we want to have a weekday Bible study, we don't have a place to do it. Now, it used to be you could meet in people's homes, but in some parts of the country, they may still work. But in this culture here, people are very reluctant to go to other people's homes. Yeah, you don't go to the house of a stranger. You maybe a relative, of course, but once you've made friends, you may go to a home of a friend. But if you just open up your home and say, we're going to do a Bible study, people are not going to come.
So our core group would come to a Bible study.
Right.
And we've done a lot of that. but to have strangers come, to a house is harder. So
Yeah. So you have to take the context into consideration too. So,
Well, we have done small activities like the Christmas tree,
yeah,
so we have done some reach out, but
right. We adopted a family at Christmas but that was mercy work. That wasn't really outreach, So, all right.
There's a new coffee shop next to the Bashes.
Yeah, we could just hang out there. So take it over.
Yeah.
So there's the ice cream place next door too. So we could. I can just see it now. I'll wait 800 pounds because of outreach. So also it was church plants are expensive and risky. There's no way around it. As I work at the church planting initiative for the synod, I've highlighted this. If you have a church planter, you're looking at $100,000 to $125,000 a year to have a church planter. If you're going to facilities, you're probably looking at another $100,000 a year just for basic facilities. That's expensive. It's hard to start. We have like little 20 people that are meeting right now. How do you bear those kinds of expenses? It becomes very challenging. Where revitalization, you have already a lot of things in place. How many churches that we plant succeed? That's a big question, one I've studied for years. The statistics are showing us right now, in the last 25 years, we have only planted about 24 churches that have actually become chartered congregations. That's across the synod. That's like one a year. Most of the churches you see start will not make it to being sustainable congregations. Somewhere in the order of 2/3, 3/4 of them will fail. That's very risky. Plus, we don't have church workers. We don't train church planters in our seminaries. And once a pastor gets out into a parish and it gets established, it's hard to recruit them to be a church planter. So we have a shortage of church planters. We have a shortage of pastors. We have a shortage of church workers all the way around. So go check out Set Apart to Serve and see what you can do about that. But yes?
Sorry, we see a consistency in the same districts, the ones where churches are successful. Is that across the board?
What we're trying to find are some good examples of churches that have planted successfully and then analyze that and hold them up as examples. We do know which districts have done the most new starts, and we also know as a percentage how many of those new starts became chartered congregations. And the district that's most active in new starts has the lowest ratio of new starts to chartered congregations. So if we hold them up as saying, wow, do what this district's doing, look at all the new starts they have, then we also have to say, oh, by the way, most of those failed to become congregations. Yeah. But we also have examples of a high percentage of planted congregations that become chartered congregations, but they've only done like 2 in the last 20 years. So how do you hold that up as an example? So we're looking for, I have some people working on this right now, trying to put together what's the best way to look at our history and hold up things that we want to replicate.
Well, and keep in mind with those numbers, there's 30 some odd districts. And when you're talking, okay, you got 25 successful church plants, and then you start, and maybe a district or two has 2 successful ones. You're looking at it.
There are some of our districts have not planted a new church in 25 years. So, and yet we're closing churches in every district. So, this is a tough time. I feel like I'm the guy coming in and saying, your cat just died, Well, who cares? Your dog just died. No, oh no. But I told the board last week, they quoted me in this in the Reporter. So if you read the Reporter, you say, I heard this before. this is a hard time to be the church, but this is the church. This is the time God's called us to be this church, and it may not. It may look challenging, and it may not be the church that we want to be. We might think it would have been easier to be the church 50 years ago. But this is the time God has chose for us to be His church. This is the situation He's put us. And so this is the thing is, let's faithfully respond to the challenges that are before us, and not just sit back and say, "Oh, woe is us. I wish I would have been in the Missouri Synod 50 years ago when it was really the hot item," right? When Billy Graham even called us the sleeping giant, you know. So don't lose heart is what my message was, you know. What's that?
You're adding so much.
That's all right. To get extra money. You get more for your money here than so. All right, so why revitalize also? Here's the overriding reason, I think. The church is the bride of Christ, and she's worthy of our efforts to support, sustain, and preserve her wherever she exists, especially under the cross, right? We're Lutherans. We should get this, you know, and that's what I was sharing with the board. This is a time for us to be under the cross. And yeah, it's not easy, and it can be discouraging, but you know, look to the cross, look to Christ. It's His church. She's beautiful, without a blemish, the object of His affection and desire. We don't write out a certificate of divorce to the bride of Christ because she's grown old and weak, but instead we do what we can to sustain her and preserve her. So there's some poor motives, though, for revitalization, and we should acknowledge them. One is we just want to increase attendance. You know, we need more people here in the church. You know, and why? Because that results in increased giving. We get more people in the church, we'll get more money in the plate, and we can actually fix the broken air conditioning unit before summer. Or, you know, we're all worn out. You know, we got 20 board positions and 5 people serving. We need more people in the church so they can be on the boards, so we can suck all the life and fervor out of them too. So, we even one. I heard one person say, "You know, we're all getting older here. We need some young people because we can't do this work anymore. It's too physically demanding." So, and then just keep the doors open. I mean, I've been contacted by congregations to say, we need to do revitalization because if we don't, we'll have to close. That's all they're concerned about. Keep the doors open. I've actually heard people say this. I just want the church to still be here when I die. Right. So there's a pastor to bury me in my church. Yes.
It's funny, you know, so often when I hear keep the doors open, my first question is, well, are they open now?
Right. Are they really open?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
That's that
good
inward
question.
focus, though.
Yeah.
The door's open for the
Inward.
purpose of us,
Right.
serving us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's an.
Open, we should be going outside.
Oh, what? Oh, radical. Radical.
What are we gonna do outside?
Good question.
Nothing from July till August.
So this is the inwardly focused church. There's a book written by a guy named Poss called Church Planting in the Secular West, where he coined the phrase introverted churches.
Yeah.
I think that's a great description because we not only are only concerned about ourselves, we're just like, oh, I don't really want to talk to those people out there. I just want to stay here where it's nice and safe and comfortable. So the proper motives for revitalization would be to continue and expand our mission and to better serve our community, to maintain and increase our presence where God has put us. In other words, it's looking outwardly. Now, what does a community around us look like? Who are the people in our community and how can we reach them? So, outward-looking church. So I've been using the word revitalization without defining it, so here's a definition. And this is a definition that's used in the Revitality resources. That it's a process in which an established congregation is equipped to actively engage in God's mission in the congregation's current context. Now, key words, a process. This is going to take time. It's going to take work. It should be a concerted effort, not just let's try something, see what happens. There's a process. There's no magic wand. Or if there is a magic wand, I don't have a high enough grade level to get it issued to me so I could wave it around. So, but I'm suspecting there's not one at all, based on, President Harrison would have at least waved it once if there were. So I got a call once from a congregation where they said, "Can you come help us with revitalization? We're having a voters meeting in 2 weeks to vote whether to close or not. We need to revitalize." It's like, say, "Oh, no, the magic wand is, not in my possession." It's a process. It takes time. Established congregation. This is not about planting new. It's about here this congregation is. It's already gathered around word and sacrament. And carrying out God's mission in the congregation's current context. Sometimes I'll work with churches that are still stuck in the 1950s. The whole world has changed around them, and they don't see it. When Mariel and I when we were doing workshops in person while we were developing the materials, we would get to a community early and kind of drive around and see what's the neighborhood look like, what's going on. And I asked a question about what the shape of the community. It was part of the workshop, and I asked the question, well, do you guys, nobody mentioned homelessness. Is there a homeless problem in your? Oh no, there's no homeless problem. We had seen like a dozen homeless people within 2 blocks of the church who were sleeping in doorways. They were blind to it. They couldn't see their current context. So how are you going to minister to people in your context if you don't understand it? So that's really key, So what is revitalization? Well, it's about vitality, and this is why such a key point, because Jesus said, "What? Wherever 2 or 3,000 are gathered in my name." Did he? Sounds sort of right. Yeah. No, we know.
Once a year, then. Once a year.
Once a year.
Yeah, just here.
Just here. And at convention, like LWML convention. Yeah. So, we know what he said. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, there's vitality, there's life. But are 2 or 3 going to pay the pastor's salary? Are 2 or 3 going to pay the mortgage? Or keep the lights on? Or catch up the 6 months you're behind in Concordia plans? 2 or 3 are not going to do that, right? So, but let's not confuse. That's viability or sustainability. Vitality is something different. Vitality is the fact that God is present and He's forgiving our sins, and there's life and salvation because 2 or 3 are gathered in Christ's name. So sometimes I see that get confused, and we don't want to confuse those 2 things. So what we want to do is, there's no such thing as a dead church. And that raising the dead axiom militates against this idea. This is a living church. Now, the question is, how do we amplify the life of that church? How do we increase it among ourselves and share it with the people around us? That's what revitalization is focused on. And it's God's work. It's not a work that we do using human methods, but a work that God does through us in word and sacrament. We do the planting and the watering. God gives the growth, right? So we know that from 1 Corinthians 3, which is really a foundational Bible passage for us. And I love this because it says, it reads, I planted, Apollos watered, God gave the growth. But then right next statement is one that's really key. Neither he who plants or he who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. So we can't make it grow. But it's a really poor farmer who goes out in the fall to harvest if he hasn't sown. Right? So what's our role here? Plant and water. So if we want to see the harvest, we plant and water. I love the old adage, if you want to sit in the shade, the best time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Yeah. Plant it now. And that's where we're at. We can't go back and undo what we haven't done. Or undo what we haven't done? Wow, that's... We can't go back and do what we hadn't done. There we go.
Plant the seeds of the tree that you might never get to sit
Yeah.
under its shade.
That is really what we're being called to do.
Right.
We're going to plant, and we may never see the harvest. But in Amos 9, there's this beautiful picture, and in verse 13, I think it says, "The day is coming when the reapers will overtake the sowers, and they will rejoice together." So we might want to be harvesters instead of sowers, but there's joy in both.
Yeah.
And that's, do what God has called us to do. Some of us will see a harvest. Some of us will sow seeds and never see the harvest. Quick story from our chief mission officer, Kevin Robson, was down at the church in Brazil. We have a partner church in Brazil. And he was the president of the church. His name is Schuler, which sounds like a really Hispanic name, doesn't it? Schuler. So he was sharing the story of the church in Brazil. He said it was started by an LCMS missionary who went there in the early 1900s, spent 2 years, had not a single convert, was totally discouraged, and was going to leave. He was actually at the port, on the dock in Porto Alegre, getting ready to leave and go back to the States when a German immigrant struck up a conversation with him and said, "Well, what are you doing here?" And he goes, "Well, actually, I've been a missionary, but it hadn't worked out, and I'm heading back." And a German immigrant said, "No, we need you to stay here. We need the gospel here. Do not quit. Do not go home." So he stayed. And now today, there's a whole church body that we're in partnership with, that we're sending missionaries together with. They're called Alliance missionaries around the world. In fact, we have some here in the States. Did that German who almost quit, did he get to see that? No. Yeah, you were going to say?
No, I'm one of them.
You're one of them. Okay. So you're from Brazil.
From Brazil.
You're from Brazil. Okay.
The story is...
Story's true. Okay.
Usually he's lying to you.
Usually I am. I'm usually just making stuff up as I go along. But see, if it wasn't a truth,
What did you get from free labor?
yeah, I know. I can't fire her. See, if it wasn't true, I already positioned myself because I said it was a story Kevin Robson told me. And I said, "That liar, what does he know?" But I'm glad it's true. So, but it just shows us that there is joy in the sowing. And there's a day coming where we will, together with the harvesters, rejoice together, right? So let's just stay focused on what God's called us to do. Now, it all happens through word and sacrament, and that's the key thing. But what role do we have in that then? Well, using our first article gifts, using what God's entrusted to us, so that we can share word and sacrament with not just among ourselves, but with the world around us. But that's how the Holy Spirit works, right? The means of grace. And this does call for innovation and integrity. So revitalization is really not a new way of being church, but it's being the church we are in new ways. So now I want to make it really clear, I'm not talking about worship style here, right? So I'm not saying, well, if you're doing traditional right now, you need to do contemporary and that'll revitalize your church. Or vice versa. If you're doing contemporary, if you just started really doing the liturgy and with smells and bells and everything, then people will flood into your church. The reality is non-church people are not sitting home saying, I would go to church at Laodicea down the road, but they don't have contemporary worship. What do non-church people know about worship? Nothing. Do they have a preference? Now, who has a preference? People are already in the church. All right. And what's that? Boomers, yeah. So,
Sorry, but it's true.
We've turned worship into a commodity where we get to all vote with our feet what we want and what we want out of it. But the reality is, an organ can be just as much as an idol as a praise band.
Yes.
All right. So let's not get hung up on this. Let's reach out into our community. If non-church people are going to have any perspective of worship, it's this: they expect it to be something different than their everyday life.
And authentic.
Yeah. Because you've been saying, hey, being a follower of Jesus is different. It's different. It's different. It's different. And then they come to church and it's like, wow, this is just like Friday night. There's a disconnect for them. So we want to make sure it's different, a true experience in God's Word, in God's presence. The style, that's secondary. It's like,
A little bit maybe?
what's that?
Tweak the Bible a little bit more?
Tweak it? Nah. I heard you sing. No. So, all right. So, but being innovative, we can be innovative. We can try new things. It's true. We can, honestly. But the integrity is a big part of it. I think it's great being Lutheran. I spent a big chunk of my young adulthood out of the church, and searching and trying all different kinds of churches, and I ended up back in the Lutheran Church. Why?
It's a truth.
Grace, really. See, I'm addicted to grace. I can't live without it. All these other churches, they were about something else. Grace is what brought me back. And so I want everybody to be a Lutheran, but it doesn't mean it has to be done exactly the same way it's been done. We can be innovative while being faithful to who we are. Revitalization, not about the numbers. It's not doing things because we're in decline. It's doing things because we're the church. If we're doing something simply to boost the numbers, then we're on the wrong track. Yeah, I can tell you 20 different ways to boost numbers.
That'd be nice, by the way.
Yeah.
No, it wouldn't.
All right. But you don't want it. You don't want to do them. So, for instance, when we were in Florida, we had this church that had this campaign that filled their sanctuary. I mean, it filled it to overflowing. What they did is everybody who showed up on a Sunday who wasn't a member got $100.
Yeah, that lasted a week.
And then at the end of the series that they were doing, there was a drawing for $10,000. And it was packed because you had to be present to win.
Not sustainable.
How many people were there after the weekend for the $10,000 drawing?
What does that do to grace?
Oh, there is no grace.
I'm
Yeah.
sick.
But they were thinking, well, if we got the people here, we could win them. This is not a work that we do using human methods. It's a God works through word and sacrament, right? So let's not worry about the numbers. Let God worry about the numbers. The Augsburg Confession says the Holy Spirit works faith when and where He wills in those who hear the gospel. That's God's part of the business. Let's just be faithful in what we're called to do. And lastly, revitalization is taking action to share the love of Christ in our context. This is the focus, right? Revitalization for the love of our neighbors. We're here to share the love of Christ. If it was just about being faithful, God should scoop us up and take us all home right now. All right? There's only two things we can do while we're in this world that we won't do in heaven.
Sin.
Sin is one. All right, so does God? We're not going to sin in heaven. So is God going to? Does He keep us in this world to sin?
No.
Yes, so grace may abound, right? Oh no, wait a minute. I said
Luther would not like
no. Paul wouldn't like it either. So no, we're not here to sin. All right, what's the other thing that we cannot do in heaven that we can do on earth?
Forgive.
Well, that kind of goes with sin. We'll lump those together. Okay. All right. Yeah. So tell people who don't know Jesus about Jesus. We can't do that in heaven, right? So that's the reason we're here, right? To show the love, to share the love of Christ. Now, there's two ways we do that: showing the love of Christ through our acts of mercy and human care. So, the comfort dog sitting out there, they're showing the love of Christ when they go to some tragic event and they're there just to bring comfort and peace to people. When we do disaster response, when we feed the hungry, when we do all sorts of human care, we're showing the love of Christ. The second way is to speak the love of Christ. Now, the first way is a great way to get to the second way. But the first way, in and of itself, will not result in anyone coming to faith in Jesus. We can show the love of Christ all day long, but until we speak the love of Christ, because faith comes from hearing, and hearing of the word of Christ, Romans 10:17, right? And so this is what we need to do. We need the whole Monte here. We need to both show the love of Christ and speak the love of Christ. And that's God's mission in our context. So the key question of revitalization then is, how do we actively engage the people in our community with the love of Christ? Right? So that's what we're going to stay focused on. How are we doing time-wise? Oh, we got plenty of time. You guys don't want lunch? All right.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. So,
I want to hear about resources.
yeah. So, in Portland, Oregon, there's this building that I drove by, and I said, I really want to find out what that building's about, because it kind of looks like a church. And I got a picture sent to me of the building, because I saw the sign but couldn't read it all. And it said, Oregon Stamp Society Building and Library. Meeting every second and fourth Tuesday from 7 to 9:30 p.m. 2.5-hour meeting twice a month. Stamp Marketplace, if that isn't enough for you, by the way. Every second and fourth Saturday for 6 hours we have a Stamp Marketplace. The public is welcome. That's you, right? You're welcome. How many of you are thinking right now, wow, I wonder how much a ticket to Portland, Oregon costs? Because I'm free on the second and fourth Tuesday next month, and I really want to spend 2.5 hours at a stamp collecting meeting. Nobody? All right. What do you think non-church people think when they drive by your building and see a sign just like this? Sunday worship, divine service, 8:30 and 10:45. Bible study and Sunday school, 9 o'clock or 9:30 or whatever. Same thing that you're thinking. Everybody welcome. No, they're not interested. This is not engaging our community, even though a lot of people, still have to build it and they will come. Yeah. So there's three.
Make it an electronic sign that'll fix everything.
Yeah, right. If it was only a digital sign, which I drove by one in. It was an ELCA church, so I can pick on them. On Signal Butte Road, I drove by this one last week, and it had their Christmas services on their electronic sign. It's like, they're really ahead of the game. They're like 10 months early. All right, so 3 parts to revitalization then. And revitality is this resource that the Synod has, and it's a play on words. It's RE: regarding vitality, regarding the life of the church, right? And the 3 parts are assessment, training for action, and outreach integrated witnessing. These are the 3 elements of revitalization. And the assessment is asking the question, where are we really? Because if you want to get somewhere, the starting point is figuring out where you are. So if I want directions on Google Map to an airport, I have to first tell it, here's where I am, and then it maps it out and tells me, how do I get there? So remember Alice in Wonderland? Okay, so so she's going down a path, and it comes to a fork in the road, right? So 2 different paths. And she talks to the cat, Cheshire Cat, and she says something like this. She goes, tell me, sir, which way should I go? And the cat says, well, it depends a great deal on where you want to end up. And the cat's, Alice's reply to that was, it doesn't much matter as long as I get somewhere. And the cat said, well, you're bound to end up somewhere if you just walk long enough. I'd say that's pretty much a summary of most congregations' strategic ministry plan. We're just going to do this long enough and we'll end up somewhere. But it sure helps to know where you are to figure out where you're going. And so this assessment tool provides us with objective, consistent assessment. Now, objective insofar as the tool itself. Human beings are actually completing it, so it becomes subjective, but the tool is objective enough, and that provides the consistency. And it's really measuring where are we in the stages of vitality, both stages of development and decline is what really describes it. And it's called CADS because I'm an Air Force trained acronymist. Yeah. Yeah, so congregational assessment of development decline status. And it's a self-assessment tool. You don't have to have anybody come into your congregation, rummage around through your underwear drawer, and tell you all your problems. You do it yourself. Because when it gets down to it, who's the most expert on your congregation? An outside person? No, the people who make up your congregation. There's no cost or obligation for CADs. You know, you can take it, you get your results, you can act on them, you can sit on them, you can do whatever you want. So hopefully you act on it, but you can also use it as a benchmark. So we're going to take it this year, and 2 years down the road we'll take it again to see what's going on. And it is looking to answer that question, where are we really? So it's 95 questions, because we're Lutherans. It's 95 questions. All right. So, and you fill it out online, or if somebody doesn't use a computer, so they can put it on paper and somebody else can enter it for them. So it takes about 20-25 minutes to complete. And there are questions in there that, like, you know, a visitor is likely to see our facilities are well cared for. Do I agree with that? Disagree with it? Yeah. I know people who have most recently become members of our congregation. I know the people who have most recently. Where that's about assimilation and incorporation. Our leaders encourage families to worship together. You know, that has to do with family ministry. So each one of these is mapped to various factors, and you're just saying I agree or disagree with it on a scale. There's nothing in there about the pastor. It's like, our pastor is a lousy preacher, you know. So it's not a scorecard of the pastor or the congregation. It's an assessment. And the results of that assessment, oh, here's some questions. Look at that. I prefer that the pastor meet my spiritual needs rather than focus on people outside of the church. Ooh.
Well, that's selfish.
Yeah. But they're, you know, if you're being honest, a lot of people would say, yeah, I'm here. Our congregation equips parents to teach our children in the faith. Yeah. Again, it's just asking, what's your opinion on that? So when you're finished, you get this single-page graphical report that shows you where you are in the stages of development and decline. 80% of our congregations are in decline, right? So, not surprisingly, most of them end up over here. But it weighs these 10 different factors. And these 10 factors then get mapped from the most disabling to the most enabling. Why do we list the disabling factors first?
Bad news first.
Because these are the things that if you focus on improving these things, you're going to see a benefit to the congregation. If you're already doing something well, keep doing it well. But if you're doing something poorly, you could use some training and help and how to use it better. So that's what this report is. Now, sometimes people ask us, well, can you tell us, like statistical information about who answered question 14 this way? And the answer is no. I mean, we can. Will we? No. We don't want paralysis by analysis. This is meant to be a roadmap for you. Here it is. This is the results. And from those results, then, you start looking at what's the part 2 of revitalization? Training, right? So in the case of our example, the congregation had the 2 highest disabling factors were outreach and inactives. So you look at outreach down here. Here are the resources that are available from the Synod under Revitality that address outreach. Connected Disciple is done. It's available. Beyond the Classroom is specifically for Lutheran schools, doing outreach for Lutheran schools. That's in a piloting process. And then this is planned later. Children's ministry. Inactive members, shepherding our stray. So rather than saying, hey, let's do a workshop and see what happens, you do an assessment, and then you can focus in on an area that you can improve upon that should have an impact on the well-being of your congregation. So there are 4 of these different training modules available now, and we have information about those if you want to look into it further, but they have to do with Connected Disciples outreach, shepherding our strays, inactive members, serving in God's mission is strategic planning for congregations, and assimilation and incorporation, wherever that is.
Halfway down, that
halfway down, right here, members of one body is in piloting as well. And that's, helping people move from just being a member to having a sense of belonging, even beyond that, to being actively engaged in the congregation's mission and prospering. Yes?
What's the percentage of the material that's complete? I see lots of planned and
Yeah, these four that I mentioned are the core pieces. The others are variations where they're applied to specific situations. So we'll grow them out. For instance, Beyond the Classroom is the best example. That's just taking Connected Disciple and modifying it for schools. Gracious Hosts is looking at it. That's a Connected Disciple too, extension. Now that we've actually got people to come join us in worship, are we greeting them? Are we following up? Are we doing those things like that? So the four main modules are all available right now. So
But one of those four is in piloting.
yeah,
The members of
and piloting means we come out and do it in person. All the rest of them are done by you. They're self-directed. All the material is there. You just need a leader who, if you can read English and check a box, you can run this workshop. It's that detailed of a leader's guide. So that's what each of the resources contains. A Bible study. So we want a Bible study because we want to address this from God's Word, and encourage people to respond to the call to action here based on what God is informing us.
Well, and the other reason we started the Bible study was for the entire congregation. So, like, if you're doing Shepherding Our Strays, a small group is really going to go through that. But the Bible study is for the entire congregation to help them understand why this needs to be done, the kind of danger that the strays are in, instead of the attitude. The things we've heard are appalling. Like, they know where the door is. They don't want to laugh.
Yeah.
Whatever they choose is just fine. So it's kind of to try to bring the attitude of, these are our brothers and sisters in Christ, and they are out there where the ravenous wolf is trying to devour them. That's the purpose of the Bible study.
Yeah. So, because it takes the whole congregation to welcome back our inactive members, so let's make, and not the whole congregation takes the workshop. So the Bible study covers everybody. The workshop, specifically the people who will be doing the work. So I mentioned, the leader guide, there's a participants workbook, and all the instructions on video. So somebody doesn't have to be an expert in this subject matter to do the training, because the instructions in the video. And I'm proud of this. I'm like the king of custom sticky notes. There's lots of sticky notes and markers and posters. And I was trained to be a trainer in the defense industry, so I was taught adult learning methods. And one of the things I see in the church is we just don't employ good adult learning methods. So these workshops are based on those. So there's a lot of activity, and the really key thing about it is you're actually doing the work as you're doing the workshop. You're not just doing a workshop and then saying, well, that was a cool workshop, and then going on. So how much would you pay for all this? $200, $500, $1,000? But wait.
Or the church is full.
But it doesn't matter, because these resources are available at no cost to LCMS congregations. This is your synod dollars at work, as I like to say. It's really because the Schwann Foundation gave us a generous grant. So next time you're eating Schwann ice cream, know that you're doing the work of the Lord. So, yeah. So,
Even though your body's a temple.
yeah. So, okay, so here's the Bible study. Centers us in God's Word, gets the whole congregation involved. And this has to do with adaptive change. What I mean by adaptive change is, technical change is learning a new skill. Adaptive change is having a different attitude. And so the Bible study is what addresses our attitude. As Mary almost pointed out, well, they're the ones that left, they can find their own way back. Versus, oh my gosh, my brother in Christ is in danger. There's a ravenous wolf seeking to destroy him. So the tougher change, okay? So each session includes video, as I mentioned, the workbook, follows the video, and there's a case study too. You know, my undergraduate degree is in business administration. I don't remember taking, other than accounting, which really sucks. I don't remember taking tests. I remember everything was a case study. Here's a case study. Here's what IBM did. What did they do right? What did they do wrong? You know, everything was about learning from other examples. So we have a case study as a basis of learning here. And then the exercises that I mentioned, you do the exercise as part of the workshop, which is really the actual work. The exercise isn't some fictitious thing that you're just talking about, you know, nebulously. It's the actual work that you're doing for your congregation. And so in the workbook, there's even stop signs that say, stop, don't go any further until you do this work. Now you're ready to move on. And so as a result, the workshop doesn't happen all in one weekend. You spread it out. You say, okay, we need, here's our weekend workshop, and now we need 2 weeks to get this work done. Then we'll schedule the next session. And the sessions vary from 6 to 9 sessions for each of these modules. So,
They vary who's involved.
right. Who is involved, it will vary from session to session as well. And then the last part of revitalization, the third leg of the stool, if you will, is that outreach integrated witnessing. And this, as I said, is absolutely essential. And so this is a professor of the school I went to that wasn't Lutheran, and he lives here in the Valley, Ken Pretty. He put it in a way, I wouldn't use his terminology necessarily, but I like the concept. If your church is struggling with plateau or decline, there's but one way out, an uncompromising commitment to outreach and evangelism. This goes back to, who are we doing this for? We're doing it for our neighbor. We're doing it to carry out the mission of Christ, to seek and save the lost. We're not doing this for ourselves. So if we're not going to do that, if we're not going to reach out into our community, then just ride it into the ground. You know, don't bother with revitalization. Yes?
So then I'm kind of trying to think through and understand this. It seems like it would be easy to think, well, we got to get right, and then we get out, and then we go do our mission, right? If I'm in revitalization, struggling church, we got to get to the right place, and then we can go do mission. That might even be a tendency in my own methodology. I might be hearing you say more, it's mission immediately. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. You may have to do some preparatory work, but yeah, you'll see that as you work through, especially like Connected Disciple. Right away, you're looking at how are we doing outreach right now, and how can we improve it, and how do we put this into practice immediately. You know, you can always expand it, refine it, grow it, but let's get busy now. Let's do something. I guess it goes back, what's the old saying? Do the right thing now. So time is short. We know that. So something like the strategic planning module, it really, the things you're going to do are going to follow that. But Connected Disciple, shepherding our strays, those are things you start doing it now. Yeah. And so what resources do we have? Well, first of all, let me point out that witness and outreach are two distinct things that are closely related. And the way I define this is witness is the work we do individually in our everyday lives. Outreach is what we do collectively as a church, as an entity. Or another way of talking about it is this is the church scattered, and this is the church gathered. So most of our time we spend as a church scattered. We go out into our workplaces, in our neighborhoods, our homes. We're not together as the church, but we're still the church. That's the previous slide that, you might have a sign like this at your church, now entering the mission field, right? It's a reminder, you're still the church. We're not only the church when we're gathered, we're the church scattered. And God has put us in places individually that the church collectively could never go. When I worked at Magnavox in Fort Wayne, I remember witnessing to my work, my fellow workers. They knew I was a Christian. They sought me out sometimes for advice. They weren't going to go to a church, and Magnavox wasn't going to let my church into the building. But there I was, being able to reach people that were beyond the reach of the church gathered. And you're in the same position. You know, there are people in your life that the church can't reach as an organization. But God is reaching them through you as the church scattered in your witness. Just calling something outreach doesn't make it outreach. This is a church in Valrico, Florida, that is between where we lived and my mother lived, so we drove by it all the time. And you can't read the sign very well, but it says, Outreach Church of God. Now, when you look at this picture here, does that just say to you, wow, I just want to be part of that. I want to go in there and enjoy myself with whoever these people are? Or is it bringing more to mind like one of these Halloween movie kind of, Yeah, just calling it outreach doesn't make it outreach, right? And we run into this, like one church we went to said, well, here's our outreach is this dinner that we do every year. It's like, well, okay, why is that outreach? Well, we invite all the other Lutheran churches in the area to come to it. Yeah.
You're stealing other people's memories.
Right. Maybe it started.
For dinner.
Yeah, it's for dinner. Maybe 50 years ago it was outreach, but then now it has nothing to do with outreach. But we assigned it to the outreach committee. It must be outreach. So this is outreach, our congregation's efforts to make disciples by engaging the non-church people in our community through our ministries and activities to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with them. So through our ministries and activities. Ministries here, by the way, is the wide sense of the term. So this is what we're trying to do, to engage people. And this is the process that's taught in Connected Disciple. Build awareness, create connections, nurture relationships, make disciples. And if you want to look at that more closely, there's more. We have some information here on that. And then witnessing is telling Jesus' story to non-church people. And the reality is we are his witnesses. He's called us as witnesses. Acts 1:8, you will be my witness. Does that sound like a question to anybody? No. It does raise some questions, but this is who we are. This is why we are here in this world. And we talk about vocational witnessing as being, in your everyday life. And so as you're going about in your everyday life, I know we're out of time.
Yeah.
Just finishing up. I'm finishing up. She's blocking the door so no one else can leave, actually. So.
I'm sure they have the information they need.
All right, so without getting into all these things, and I have really cool quotes from Martin Luther on this, it really boils down to this, what I said earlier. This is why we're in the world. And it's about love. This is the ultimate way to love our neighbor. Every other act of mercy is temporal mercy. This is an act of mercy that lasts forever. This is eternal mercy. And this is true love for our neighbor, that we tell them about Jesus Christ. We have lots of challenges because we live in a pluralistic culture. And we can get into that some other time. There's a lot of things keeping us from witnessing. But it really boils down to these two, avoidance and ambivalence. We're afraid, or we don't care, which is sad. To actually say we don't care that other people are perishing. But that's unfortunate, but a reality. But here's the bottom line. What we're really doing when we're witnessing is we're just broken people coming to share good news with other broken people. That there's a healer. And this is the healer. We want to introduce them to that healer. And to do so in a way that's based in the gospel. You know what? You could try to beat up people to get them to witness, but that doesn't work. The real motivation here comes from sharing in the joy that Christ has when lost people are gathered into his church. And so Jesus is inviting you to be his witness, to share in his joy. You need anything more than that to motivate you? Like, wow, I get to share in God's joy. So, and we see that in Luke 15 especially. So the resource for this is Everyone is Witness. So Revitalization doesn't have a separate evangelism module. It just plugs in Everyone is Witness. And the goal of Everyone is Witness, or the purpose of it, is captured here, to make third article witnesses telling the second article story using the first article gifts. So the third article, we know the Holy Spirit works faith when and where He wills, right? We're doing the planting and watering. Second article, I'm going to tell you about Jesus, not about me, not about my experiences, but about Jesus and His story. My story might help me get to His story, but it's His story that's the important story. It's His story that creates life where there's death and light where there's darkness. And first article gifts, all the things that God has entrusted to me to this end. This is why He's given me life and my reason and my senses and my shoes and clothing and all the things that I have, is so I can tell other people about Jesus. So everyone who's witness uses this Lassie approach. Listen, ask, seek, share, invite, encourage. Notice where it starts? Listening. So it's a relational and contextual approach to witnessing by actually investing yourself in another person, by listening and asking and caring about them, and then looking for the ways that you can share Jesus' story with them. So we plant, we water, we do it in love, and we anticipate God's love to cause the growth. So that's the bottom line. So this is where you can get more information about the resources. We also have a display out here, just actually straight down the stairs along with the other Synod ministries. And we brought some stuff with us too. So if you want to look at some stuff before you go. And I even brought some Revitality boonie hats. If you didn't get your Revitality boonie hat yet. And sorry we ran a little over, but you're welcome to stay if you want to ask questions or talk more. But you're also welcome to go if you need to get moving.